Hey guys, Shane here, Echo Soundworks. In this video, we'll be talking about voice leading. So I think it's one of those things that you've probably heard about, and you might be thinking, oh man, do I do this? Am I doing it wrong? And I wanted to make this video for two reasons. First, I want to show you how to do it, but I also want to talk about how it kind of expel some myths, how it's not super important for EDM, pop, and hip hop. Voice leading is a music theory concept that if you take any music theory courses like I did in college, you'll run into a lot of it. It becomes really important. It becomes a huge part of how you write your music. Well, it doesn't have to be for modern music. So let's dive into Logic and check out how we can not only create it, but also check out how it creates different vibes when you don't use voice leading versus when you do. All right, first things first, let's define voice leading. So voice leading is a simple idea. It's this idea that you want to create smooth transitions between note changes, whether it's within a melody or contained in a chord progression. And smooth usually translates to small jumps or gaps in between the notes. So if you're thinking from a semitone perspective, like if you're looking at the piano roll inside of a DAW, you don't want massive jumps in between the tones. If you can, you try to avoid it if it doesn't change the vibe of your track. Now that's the key for me. I will not use voice leading if by inverting a chord, it ruins the vibe of the track that I'm trying to establish. For me, it's much more important, and I'd argue that's more important for most modern producers and artists. It's paramount to keep the vibe, to keep the feeling of the song alive, rather than being like, yeah, but I moved in a parallel fifth, or I have a parallel octave, or I didn't voice lead, right? So that's what we're looking at in this video. So kind of two parts, right? All right, so I'm using our NoHo upright piano for this, and we have a basic chord progression, F major, C major, A minor, and E minor. These are basically just root triads with the octave on the bottom. So let's have a listen. All right, so this doesn't use good voice leading. Parallel octaves are occurring, right? So this is theoretically what a lot of people would describe as quote unquote incorrect. So one of my biggest issues with all things music theory in terms of voice leading and how you need to write melody and chord progressions is the idea that it almost comes across as prescriptive. It prescribes a right and wrong way to do it, whereas it should be described. It should be a descriptive process, giving you tools to do something that you ultimately want to do. So this chord progression is a chord progression that you've heard in tons of pop songs if you guys listen to pop music. And it's actually voiced like this. Like if you, Rihanna's Stay, that doesn't have perfect voice leading. There's a lot of songs, like Adele songs don't as well. It's just whatever fits the vibe of the track. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at how we can create some voice leading within this progression and see how it not only changes the vibe, but also obviously how to create voice leading. So the easiest way to create voice leading in a chord progression, I think, is if you are using the octave below, just delete those for now. Well, I'll copy them and hit delete. It's just less notes to look at. So now we're just working with the triads. So what you could do to alleviate the jump is find a common tone. That's why it's called common tone voice leading within the chord. So if we look at C, or F rather, it's F, A, and C. Our next chord, which is C major, is C, E, and G. So the only note that it shares is the C. So what we can do is we can take this C and pop it up here to this C, an octave above it. So now what we're doing is we're not moving a fourth down on our root note, right? We're only moving a half step down essentially, and we're sharing this common tone. So what we just did to this C major chord is we inverted it. It's now an inversion of the root position. It sounds like this. Right, so we could leave it like this because this isn't that huge of a jump, and the C major and A minor, they're sharing a tone. And the jump from A minor to E minor, it's just a couple steps down, right? So we wouldn't have to change everything if we didn't want to. But we can try here. So this E, we can pop down here because we're just basically inverting it. We're putting the E on the bottom. And our last chord is an E minor, so now we have even less movement. Right, but that's a whole different vibe from what we started with. So let me go back and we'll copy and paste in the octaves. right? So it sounds good. It doesn't sound bad at all. It's not, you know, it works. It's just a different vibe. I don't think one is empirically better than the other. Now, I will say though, when you are working with a chord progression and you start to think about good voice leading, there is the added benefit that you can usually chop up the progression and start to move things around. So we're going to do that now. We're just going to start to take different chords from different positions within the progression and rearrange our initial chord progression, right? So now if we go back in and listen. So we're still starting with the F. Then we're going to the E minor, to the A, and then we go down to the C, right? Now, this potentially wouldn't sound good if we stuck with that initial way it was written, where it was jumping, right? Because it'd be even huger jumps potentially. Sometimes it'll make the jumps bigger and awkward. Sometimes it won't, right? But this sounds pretty cool. So when you are creating your chords, you're being somewhat conscious of voice leading. Usually you can be like, if I don't like that progression, you can chop it up and rearrange it, and it should all still fit together. But I'll leave you with this last thought, guys. Be more concerned about vibe and feeling of the song versus if you're using proper voice leading from a classical music context. It will usually make the better track. So if you guys have any questions or comments, post them and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you like this video and want to see more like it, please hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.